Thank you. We're getting ready to get started, so if you can find a seat and silence your devices. And I'll take care of a couple of housekeeping things real quick. Bathrooms are right to your left. This is an old house, so our plumbing is pretty stressed these days. My name is Pat Revere Seal, and I am a member of the Friends of Weymouth Board of Directors. Along with Andy Rose, who is standing in the back, we co-chair the Literary Committee. On behalf... Okay. I've only got 3 minutes, so hold your applause. On behalf of the entire board and the staff at Weymouth, it's my pleasure and my honor to welcome you to our home. It's appropriate that Ed Southern calls this ceremony and this gathering a literary homecoming. Ever since the Boyds, Catherine and James, who built this home and lived here, invited the first writers into this house, it has become, the literary arts have been the heart and soul of this welcoming place. The Writers in Residence program and the author readings were the first programs established at Weymouth in 1979 when it opened as a nonprofit, and Sam Reagan was president of the Friends of Weymouth. 14 years later, during Reagan's tenure as North Carolina Poet Laureate, he headed the efforts to establish the North Carolina Literary Hall of Fame as a program of the North Carolina Writers Network and housed here at Weymouth. The portraits of the inductees are displayed upstairs in this home in what was James Boyd's study. The portraits of this year's inductees are displayed downstairs in the foyer. I hope that after the ceremony you'll take some time to visit the Hall of Fame, also to look around the house and the grounds. But before we get started, I'd like for you to join me in a moment of silence in memory of the two inductees that we lost since the last ceremony. Sam Art Williams, Fred Chappell, may their creative spirits and the words they left with us continue to inspire, enrich, and change our lives. We are indeed fortunate today that at this moment in history, our power to create literature remains uncensored, even as we learn of new attempts to ban books every day. Today, we honor and celebrate 5 of North Carolina's finest writers. Writers whose words, actions, and courage have sparked our imagination, given us a greater understanding of the world we share, and provided us with a larger, wider lens through which to view this world. Their work will continue to have a lasting impact in future generations, and I thank you for these gifts and more that you have given to us. We will present the inductees in alphabetical order. I will introduce the people who will be introducing them, and then they will come up and accept. Their extensive and impressive bios are in your program. We can get to the wine a little sooner and the visiting a little sooner if we do it this way. The first inductee this year is Joseph Bathanti. Please welcome Jacob Bathanti and Beckett Bathanti, who will present Joseph for induction and read from his works. Thank you.
Thanks very much, and good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to introduce my father, Joseph Bathanti. Growing up, we saw constantly how our father's work was rooted in community, artistically, but also in service, and how the two of these together have been inextricable in his career across some 50 years. From thousands of students that he's taught and mentored, to his work teaching and advocating for incarcerated people, to helping North Carolina veterans of the armed services harness the healing power latent in their creativity, and of course his tenure as North Carolina Poet Laureate from 2012 to 2014. His work presents a unifying theme that is again rooted in community, and itself, I believe, an act born of service. It opens doors into topographies of memory and of local cultures that have vanished or have been transformed in the flow and flux of time. His beloved family and the Italian-American communities of his ancestral neighborhood of East Liberty and Pittsburgh, the haunted landscapes and social panoramas of rural North Carolina, and the gentle Appalachians of our West, smitten by mountaintop removal, environmental degradation. He's an Appalachian writer. While maybe he didn't think much about this growing up in Pittsburgh, that city is an Appalachian city, shaped by dynamics of industry, migration, and extraction that echo across Appalachia. And so a vital through line of this work bears witness to the great beauty and diversity, the struggle and the constant changes of the region. And I believe that it's especially important to note this in light of the devastating, the heartbreaking impact of Hurricane Helene in western North Carolina and in our neighboring states. This writer's work of bearing witness to deep struggles, personal and internal, social and political, is embedded within a long, Pan-American prophetic tradition. That is to appropriate a little bit the great Chilean, Pablo Neruda, hearing the poet, eyes may lift themselves, perceiving a path toward beacons of greater freedom and liberation, that we may hold on to the testaments of memory, and in doing so forge new futures, brighter futures for our state, for our region, and onward. It's my pleasure now to introduce my brother Beckett, who will read a little bit from our father's work.
What an honor to read a little of our dad's work. We've seen him do countless times before. This is Steady Daylight. Today in heaven, my father turned 105. Finally working steady daylight, he's got it knocked. 8 to 4, double time and a half. No asbestos, no shoveling slag on the open hearth. No depending from a boom crane. 6 degrees in sleet. No boss, 13 weeks vacation annually. Kingdom come. The union up here takes zero shit. Home well before dark. Traffic mellow, blue sky. Nothing but green signals. Plenty of time once home. Perfect parking spot right in front of the house to sit a minute, smoke a Camel, sip an Iron City pony beneath the olive and lemon trees he planted when he first arrived. 368 days after my mother to celebrate their 59th anniversary. They grow well in heaven. Mild weather year-round like Puglia, save for snow on holy days and feasts. He shaves and showers in the cellar. My mother has his clothes for the party laid out on their bed, khakis, short-sleeved, summer white shirt. The parties at Aunt Lou's, everybody there at each stage of their lives concurrently. Another time this would have struck them as outlandish. Not now, They were poor, they suffered. Now they're happy. Money's not an issue. No one gets sick, no one gets hurt. The neighborhood's safe. Everyone gets along at all times. They act reasonably. Light surrounds them. It's that kind of place. Angels from the ether bear platters of ravioli from Grosseria Italiano in Bloomfield, sausage from Joe Grosso on Larimer Avenue, lemon ice from Moyo's, sfogliatelles from Barsati, Parmesan, aged for eternity, scungili from Umberto's Clam House that Uncle Ralph scored from a Detroit crony, wine from the wedding feast at Canaan. My mother made the artichokes and baked my dad's favorite egg custard pie. Every single candle, 105. Joe looks good, says my mother. Says my dad, give me a kiss, Rose. With no hesitation, she dips in. Long brown hair, brown eyes, red lipstick, sassy 40s dress, halo hovering like lilac. My dad's taken to rope sandals and a straw fedora. They're movie stars. She sits on his lap. He looks at his watch. Tomorrow's another working day, he says, and winks. They form a conga line and weave the rooms and halls up through the bedrooms into the attic, singing Grandma's Lie soap. Aunt Margaret deals blackjack at the big dining room table. All the food is still out, but they decide to cook again. Peppers and eggs, hot sausage, black velvet, the blonde in the black velvet dress and pearl on its label, turns itself in trickles upside down into shot glasses. Chubby checker on the turntable, the kids doing the twist. Uncle Pippi starts with the Italian songs. Papa twirls Aunt Teresa in a tarantella, and suddenly winter begins to snow. Here they are, saying goodbye, time to go home, kissing, bundling babies, shackling chains to cars. My father helps his mother, Maria Cristina Bocchicchio, down the steep stone stairs to Leamington Avenue. He's not seen her since he was 5, 100 years, chin on. On his right arm, his hammer arm, is tattooed an American eagle, arrows in its beak, above which unfurls Mother. He must have gotten it in the army. How could I have never asked? Angelo stands to his knees in snow and plays his lost violin. And now Joseph Bathanti.
I don't know why in the world you'd want to hear from me now. Good afternoon. Thank you, boys. As a society, we're habitually barraged by the divisions among us, and I won't deny such disparities exist. But in the devastating wake of Helene, what Joan and I have witnessed over the past many days in the tiny valley in which we reside in our home county of Watauga is much more powerful than anything that divides us. It's what beats so passionately in the capacious hearts of the folks who come running with chainsaws, generators, front loaders, water, hot meals, diapers, pet food, when their neighbors are in peril, often enough neighbors they don't even know. It's charity, shared humanity, breathtaking to behold. It's love for the least of these. Let's take a moment to think about the citizens of Western North Carolina, their indomitable spirit that characterizes all North Carolinians, and all those folks everywhere who found themselves in the deadly path of Helene. That same spirit of indomitability is characterized, lived in palpable ways by writers all across the state. Those beneath this tent and beyond, and those enshrined on the second floor of the Boyd House. To be numbered among you, among them, many of whom I idolize, is an honor one can never prepare for. My lasting gratitude to them and to you, and for the sheer providence that I landed in North Carolina from my hometown of Pittsburgh back in 1976 and was embraced by such a brilliant and generous community of writers, you, my great friends and colleagues. Foremost and always, thanks to Joan Carey Bathanti, my beloved wife of 47 years, constant companion, best friend, since I first laid eyes on her in the ballroom of the Georgian Terrace Hotel on August 17th, 1976. Not incidentally, where the ballroom scene in Gone with the Wind was filmed. She didn't laugh when I confided I wanted to be a writer, and predicated on that, I begged her to marry me. It is no exaggeration that I would not be standing here without her, period. You've already heard from Jones and my rather spectacular sons, Jacob and Beckett. They've given me today what dads dream of. In attendance as well as my perfect sister, Marie Reese, a woman of zeal and faith, my dear brother-in-law, Jones' brother, Steve Carey from Atlanta, Desiree Frome, Beckett's partner, and so very many of Jones and my lifelong friends, a number of whom harken back to those glorious early days when we first showed up in Charlotte. I'm so very grateful for the unswerving support over the years of Appalachian State University. Teaching there has been a life-changing experience. And most profoundly, most redundantly, with abiding love, I can never say it enough. Thank you to my heroic, humble parents, Joseph D. and Rosalind Bathanti, Joe and Rose, Union steelworker and Union seamstress, son and daughter of Italian and French immigrants. They travel with me at all times, still dole out expert advice, and remain the most fascinating people I've ever met. And of course, Jones and Steve's mother, my southern mom, Rowena Carey Payne. No one gets anywhere himself. I am a prime example of this. There is a good work ahead for us to engage in. Championing reading, writing, and literacy in unfettered, uncensored, unbanned democratic access to books, in all literature, in all art, among the diverse range of citizens in North Carolina, the state I love and call home, the state that has so generously sustained me as a writer and allowed me to prosper in that role. Words are all we have, says the great Irish writer Samuel Beckett. Appalachian poet Jackson Wheeler reminds us, words bear witness. Let's forge ahead to nurture our community of writers, and especially our successors, the children. Let's wield words, all we have, judiciously with resolve, courage, and love. Let's bear witness. Thank you so very much for this prodigious honor.
Thank you, Joseph. Thank you, Beckett and Jacob. Next, Shirley Moody Turner will present Anna Julia Cooper for induction and also read for us from a selection of her works. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you. First, thank you so much, Ed Southern. Thank you, the North Carolina Literary Hall of Fame, for this work in recognizing and fostering the literary life and heritage of North Carolina. I am humbled, and I mean that sincerely, to present and accept this award on behalf of Anna Julia Cooper. Anna Julia Cooper, author, educator, scholar, rose to prominence as one of the nation's leading voices on race and gender equality in the late 19th through mid-20th century. In 1892, she published the work for which she would become most well known, A Voice from the South by a Black Woman of the South. And in 1925, she became the fourth Black woman in the U.S. to earn a PhD when she received her doctorate from the University of Paris Sorbonne. Even though she traveled widely and lived out the majority of her long life, she lived to be 105, in Washington, D.C., always she remained deeply connected to and influenced by her early life in North Carolina. Cooper was born on August 10th, 1858 in Raleigh, North Carolina. Her mother was Hannah Stanley Haywood. Her father was her mother's enslaver. After emancipation, Cooper entered the first class of St. Augustine's in Raleigh. There, she protested for and won the right to the boys' curriculum, waging what she counted as her first of many battles for educational equality for African Americans. Soon after, she began tutoring and teaching at St. Augustine's, pairing her intellectual work and her commitment to teaching and education for others. Cooper then followed a path that had been laid by previous generations of Black North Carolinians that ran from Raleigh, North Carolina to Oberlin, Ohio, where she enrolled at the Oberlin College. After earning her BA and MA in mathematics at Oberlin, Cooper moved to Washington, D.C., where she joined the vibrant social, intellectual, and political scene as a teacher at the famed M Street, later Dunbar High School. It was during that time that Cooper published her 1892 collection of essays, A Voice from the South. The work was a stunning literary achievement. It spoke across multiple registers about the complex issues besetting the U.S. at the turn into the 20th century. In it, Cooper named the intersecting politics of race, gender, and class that she felt stymied real advancement and social change. She artfully challenged the sexism of Black male-led freedom movements and the racism of white women's suffrage organizations, and instead, she outlined a basis for a coalition politics in which Black women, because they stood at the center of the race problem and the woman question, were uniquely positioned to give voice. She surveyed the contemporary landscape of public opinion and recognized how crucial it was to enter the national debate at the level of ideas. One by one, she pulled lofty ideas from their resting place as counterpoints. She pulled lofty ideas from their resting place as accepted fact and presented her and other Black women's experiences as legitimate counterpoints to the devastating mistruths that circulated in the wider public discourse. In short, she offered what scholar Mary Helen Washington identified as the fullest articulation of a Black feminist politics to come out of the 19th century. Always, though, Cooper remained committed to her hometown, to North Carolina, and to Black women of the South. And speaking at the World's Columbian Exposition in 1893, Cooper poignantly reminded her audience, "I speak for the colored woman of the South, because it is there that millions of Blacks in this country have watered the soil with their blood and tears, and it is there, too, that the colored woman of America has made her characteristic history, and there her destiny is evolving." But Cooper's South extended from North Carolina to Ohio to Washington, D.C., to Paris, Toronto, Haiti, the West Indies. She saw connections between freedom struggles in the Caribbean, histories of enslavement in the U.S., Jim Crow practices and policies in the nation's capital, and archival silences about Black literary life and history as intertwined. Her broad, polymathic mind understood liberation in broad and inclusive terms, and she imagined a place for Black women intellectuals at the center, not the margins, of American social, political, and cultural life. After Voice from the South, Cooper continued to write and publish for another 7 decades. She worked in multiple genres and forms across a range of outlets and venues, and I won't go over all of them here today. all 7 decades. She worked in translation. She wrote and defended a dissertation in French on France's attitude towards slavery during the French and Haitian revolutions. She contributed to columns in the local Washington, D.C. newspaper. She edited the papers of her dear friend and fellow intellectual activist, Charlotte Fortin Grimke, and she penned numerous essays, plays, poems, and pageants. Some of her writing is unpublished, some unfinished, some just imagined in outlines and notes. But across her body of work, Cooper was unflinching in her critique of oppression and domination in all its forms, and unwavering in her commitment to education and access to an intellectual life for all people, regardless of race, gender, class, or condition. At the very end of her life, she returned in an unfinished manuscript to North Carolina, beginning but not completing a family history. She starts with who I presume was her grandfather, Jacob Stanley. She remembers him as a broad-chested, upstanding black man who contributed to the building of the North Carolina state capitol. She quickly trails off, however, after noting that Jacob Stanley was a slave, but she does not know how come, hinting at an untold story of black success, enslavement, and the legacy of both in North Carolina. This award recognizes Anna Julia Cooper, a daughter of Raleigh, the daughter of Hannah Stanley, an educator, author, black woman intellectual, part of a legacy of educated, enterprising black North Carolinians who charted a path that Cooper would follow so that she could blaze a trail for others. It recognizes Cooper as part of an untold history that she herself started but did not finish, of black success, enslavement, and the legacy of both in North Carolina. I consider it a great honor and privilege to be asked to present and accept this award on her behalf, to recognize Anna Julia Cooper not for herself only, but as a representative of a long line of 19th century black authors and educators from North Carolina. On behalf of myself, Cooper scholars from around the world, Cooper's descendants in Washington, D.C. and beyond, thank you for recognizing author, educator, and trailblazing black woman intellectual Anna Julia Cooper and the literary legacy she represents. Thank you. And now I'm going to read a short-ish passage from A Voice from the South. The speech from which this is taken, the essay, is called Woman versus the Indian in 1892. The cause of freedom is not the cause of a race or a sect, a party or a class. It is the cause of humankind, the very birthright of humanity. It is important and fundamental that there be no chromatic or other aberration when the teacher is settling the point, who is my neighbor? It is not the intelligent woman versus the ignorant woman, nor the white woman versus the black, the brown, and the red. It is not even the cause of woman versus man. Nay, 'tis woman's strongest vindication for speaking that the world needs to hear her voice. It would be subversive of every human interest that the cry of one half of the human family be stifled. Woman, in stepping from the pedestal of statue-like inactivity in the domestic shrine and daring to think and move and speak, to undertake to help shape and mold and direct the thought of her age, is merely completing the circle of the world's vision. Hers is every interest that has lacked an interpreter and a defender. Her cause is linked with that of every agony that has been dumb, every wrong that needs a voice. It is no fault of man's that he has not been able to see truth from her standpoint. It does credit both to his head and heart that no greater mistakes have been committed or even wrongs perpetrated while she sat making tatting and snipping paper flowers. Man's own innate chivalry and the mutual interdependence of their interests have ensured his treating her cause, in the main at least, as his own. And he is pardonably surprised and even a little chagrined, perhaps, to find his legislation not considered perfectly lovely in every respect. But in any case, his work is only impoverished by her remaining dumb. The world has had to limp along with the wobbling gait and one-eyed hesitancy of a man with one eye. Suddenly, the bandage is removed from the other eye, and the whole body is filled with light. It sees a circle where before it saw a segment. The darkened eye restored, every member rejoices with it. And what a travesty of its case for this eye to become plaintiff in a suit eye versus foot. There is that dull clod, the foot, allowed to roam at will, free and untrammeled, while I, the source and medium of light, brilliant and beautiful, am fettered in darkness and doomed to desuetude. Is it not hitching our wagon to something much lower than a star? Is not woman's cause broader and deeper and grander than a blue stocking debate or an aristocratic pink tea? Why should woman become plaintiff in a suit versus the Indian or the Negro or any other race or class who have been crushed under the iron heel of Anglo-Saxon power and selfishness? When race, color, sex, condition are realized to be the accidents, not the substance of life, and consequently as not obscuring or modifying the inalienable title to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, then is mastered the science of politeness, the art of courteous contact, which is not but the practical application of the principle of benevolence, the backbone and marrow of all religion. Then woman's lesson is taught, woman's cause, one. Not the white woman, nor the black woman, nor the red woman, but the cause of every man or woman who is writhed silently under a mighty wrong. Her wrongs are thus indissolubly linked with all undefended woes, all helpless suffering, and her plenitude and the plenitude of her rights will mean the final triumph of all right over might, the supremacy of the moral forces of reason and justice and love in the government of the nation. Thank you.
That was powerful. Thank you. Now, Jill McCorkle will present Kaye Gibbons for induction, and Leslie Peters and Louise Floyd will read a selection of her works.
Thank you. It is such an honor to be here today to get to introduce Kaye Gibbons, and that we North Carolinians get to claim such a literary star. I'll never forget getting a call from Louis Rubin, esteemed UNC professor and founder of Algonquin Books, back in the early 80s, saying that I had to meet a young woman from Raleigh who was taking his Southern literature class, that she was a brilliant talent, the real thing. That was Kaye, a young mother who had gone back to school, and she had just written her astonishing novel, Ellen Foster, the story of an endearing 11-year-old surviving against all odds. I remember Kaye telling me how it opened, quoting that powerful first sentence that had come to her, "When I was little, I would think of ways to kill my daddy." By then, we had a ritual. I lived on the campus bus line, and Kaye would drive over, and we rode to campus together. Entertaining rides I would not trade for anything. Kaye was reading Faulkner and O'Connor and devouring book after book after book and speaking of them all as if they were neighbors across the street. We talked about writing and what her young daughter Mary was doing, and it seems Kaye always had a new recipe she was trying or some memorable anecdote that made us laugh. Many I think of often still. Her knowledge and observations were riveting. In person as well as on the page, Kaye has the magical gift of storytelling that can have you laughing out loud one minute and moved to tears the next. As Gordon Lish said of her work, and I don't think he's someone who gives a lot of compliments, she is going to snatch the heart right out of your chest. An absolute truth. Ellen Foster won the Sue Kaufman Prize for First Fiction from the American Academy of Arts and Letters and paved the way for a stunning body of work and numerous awards and recognition. A virtuous woman, a cure for dreams, charms for the easy life. How can you not love all these titles? A gem, each one, sights unseen, and on the occasion of my last afternoon. Kaye's work is firmly rooted in history and a vivid knowledge of this part of the world, but at the core always is a strong and compassionate embrace of the human heart. There are those rare writers who have their own language, claiming vocabulary and phrases in new and original ways. I think of Twain and Flannery O'Connor, Grace Paley, Barry Hannah, and Kaye is right in there with the best. Every page with something surprising and memorable. Alfred Kazin, when commenting on Kaye's early work, referred to it as her fresh American lingo. Walker Percy's description was lovely, breathtaking, and Eudora Welty said stunning, the honesty of thought and eye and feeling and word. There's never been a term since the publication of Ellen Foster that I haven't recommended Kaye's novels to my students. A lot of years by now. Her brilliant work changes lives, and I'll always be grateful to have witnessed her beginning and to stand here today in celebration of her many accomplishments and eager to read whatever is next. I think of Kaye's wonderful body of work, and in the words of good old Ellen Foster, that will always amaze me. And now you're going to hear from her lovely daughters, Leslie and Louise.
Hello, I'm Leslie. This is Louise, and we'll be reading from Ellen Foster. When I was little, I would think of ways to kill. We practiced this, I swear. When I was little, I would think of ways to kill my daddy. I would figure out this or that way and run it through my head until it got easy. The way I liked best was letting go a poisonous spider in his bed. It would bite him, and he'd be dead and swollen up, and I would shudder to find him so. Of course, I would call the rescue squad and tell them, come quick, something's the matter with my daddy. When they come in the house, I'm all in a state of shock and just don't know how to act, what with two colored boys heaving my dead daddy onto a roller cot. I just stand in the door and look like I'm shaking all over. But I did not kill my daddy. He drank his own self to death the year after the county moved me out. I heard how they found him shut up in the house dead and everything. Next thing I know, he's in the ground and the house is rented out to a family of 4. All I did was wish him dead real hard every now and then. And I can say for a fact that I am better off now than when he was alive. I live in a clean brick house and mostly am left to myself. When I start to carry an odor, I take a bath and folks tell me how sweet I look. There's plenty to eat here, and if we run out of something, we just go to the store and get some more. I had me an egg sandwich for breakfast, mayonnaise on both sides, and I may fix me another one for lunch. 2 years ago, I did not have much of anything. Not that I live in the lap of luxury now, but I am proud for the school bus to pick me up here every morning. My stylish, well-groomed self standing in the front yard with the grass green and the hedge bushes square. I figure I made out pretty good considering the rest of my family is either dead or crazy.
Every Tuesday, a man comes to get me out of social studies, and we go to a room and talk about it all. Last week, he spread out pictures of flat bats for me to comment on. I mostly saw flat bats. Then I saw big holes that body could fall into. Big, black, deep holes through the table and the floor. And then he took off his glasses and screwed his face up to mine and tells me I'm scared. I used to be, but I'm not now, is what I told him. I might be a little nervous, but I'm never scared. Oh, but I do remember when I was scared. Everything was so wrong, like somebody had knocked something loose and my family was shaking itself to death. Some wild ride broke and the one in charge strolled off and let it spin and shake and fly off the rail. And they both died, tired of the wild, crazy spinning, wore out and sick. Now you tell me if that's not a fine style to die in. She's sick and he drunk with the moving. They finally gave in to the emotion and let the wind take them from here to there.
We're really proud of you, Bob. Now let's have Kaye Gibbons.
I've had oral surgery, so I sound like Elmer Fudd. But I'm here. About 35 years ago, we started thinking about moving to California, and I started worrying about not being able to write out there. And didn't stop until I went to Jackson on the next book tour. And I said, well, hell, I'll ask you to a Welty. She'll tell me what to do. And I knew what she told me would be memorable, and it was. I said, I got a problem. If I leave North Carolina and live somewhere else like California, would I still be a Southern writer? And she leaned toward me and said, if your cat has her kittens in the oven, would you call them muffins? And I always tried to sound intelligent around her, but I said, do what, huh? What? And she said, if your cat has her kittens in the oven, would you call them muffins? And I said, she said, think about it. So I did, and I have for 35 years. After I got over the stroke it caused. But she meant that I carry that need and urge and will and desire to write within me. I'm lucky that way. All writers do, and we are lucky that way. And I'm also lucky to have been born in North Carolina, and lucky to have been taught by Louis Rubin, and lucky and blessed that Lee Smith, Clyde Edgerton, Jill McCorkle, Reynolds Price accepted me and supported me. And most of all, I'm grateful and forever blessed by the love of my family. 2 of my grandchildren are here, and they're learning to read right now. And I heard one of them ask the other one last night, can you read? And she said, I'm working on it. So let us all work on it. Thank you.
Our next inductee is Lenard Moore, and Crystal Simone Smith will present him for induction and read from a selection of his works. Crystal.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Ed and Pat and everyone who has taken part in planning this very perfect day. Most of us know Lenard because of his many ties and suits and hats that he's worn over the years. First and foremost, y'all, he's sharp. The brother is sharp. When I say hats, I am speaking literally and metaphorically. He is the co-founder of the Washington Street Writers Group, executive chairman of the North Carolina Haiku Society, former president of the Haiku Society of America, and editor of numerous anthologies, all while writing and publishing his own work, which has appeared in hundreds of journals in various forms and translations. To state it plain, Lenard Moore is an overachieving workaholic. We all know this is untrue because when you are fortunate to live out your passion, it is not work, it is a way of being. He is also the recipient of numerous awards, notably the North Carolina Award for Literature 2014 and the prestigious Haiku Museum of Tokyo Award 2003, 1994, and 1983. For decades, he has gathered Black writers across the state to workshop and write. I am a member of the Carolina African American Writers Collective, founded by Lenard. As a fierce practitioner of haiku, he has mentored a new generation of Black poets, me included. Next year, through his nurturing leadership, our collective will celebrate its 30-year anniversary. That's worth applauding. Lenard is a leading figure in the contemporary haiku movement. He is distinguished, publishing more haiku than any other African American poet. His love of the natural world was sparked early during his upbringing in rural North Carolina. His early free verse poems, featured in his collection Forever Home, gleam with days and seasons spent among the rich soil and farm work of his family's land. This is evident in his poem entitled The Home Place. When I walk the path this morning, there is only a slight light in the thinned woods. I come upon a creek near a tin-roofed house, and there's no one anywhere to witness my presence. Meanwhile, the wind rises through the branches, but soon reaches groundfall. A faint smell of honeysuckle sustains itself on the air, while quail rove the sloped weeds. My eyes will not let go. Now I think of my great-grandfather, who one time walked these woods through daylight. This is the country he knew since boyhood, and I am grateful for this home place. Here I too wish to grow old and stand without words in this part of the world, so lively and pure. I can hear a dog barking somewhere in the far distance, here where the voices of former life do not speak, their spirits huddling into themselves, a brotherhood of saints. We are this fresh green world which cradles everything into itself. It is my distinct pleasure as his colleague, his friend, his mentee, to give you Lenard D. Moore.
see so many friends out there. Wow. Good afternoon. I am so excited. I give honor to God. I give thanks to my ancestors upon whose shoulders I stand. And I give thanks to my family and friends. A lot of my family members are here, came up from other places in the state, that's particularly my hometown, Jacksonville, and some came from out of state, Kansas, Missouri, my aunt, my first cousins, and there are some, as I mentioned, from my hometown, which is Jacksonville, and my adopted home, Raleigh, which I call Raleighwood. Been living there for decades. I know that I have only 5 minutes, but here we go. To that end, my acknowledgments cannot be an exhaustive list, but I will do what I can. I have been on this writing journey for decades, including when I was in boyhood, in high school, in the U.S. Army, in college, teaching poetry at numerous schools and colleges. I must mention that North Carolina has such a great community of writers, organizations, which have been helpful. To add to this community, as Crystal stated, I have founded the Carolina African American Writers Collective and co-founded the Washington Street Writers Group. CAAWC, the collective, and WSWG, Washington Street Writers Group, are the nurturing groups that have become what they are because of the dedicated members. I have served as the executive chairman, as Crystal said, but for 30 years. This year make 30 years. I was elected in 1994. This year, as you know, 2024, and Dave Russo has really propelled NCSU. North Carolina Haiku Society. Not NCSU, that's NC State. Then there is Cave Canon, which I greatly appreciate. I have tried to innovate, find meaning, and document my writing. This great state, North Carolina, wherever I travel, I'm documenting. I love the landscape. Maybe I don't have to say that, you know, about my haiku and tanka and many other forms, more than 35 different forms. I appreciate my mentors, Jerry W. Ward Jr., Eugene B. Redmond, and Lorraine Ellis Harr. And of course, my professor, Gerald W. Barracks, and my fiction writing teacher, Angela Davis Gardner. There have been other writers who looked at my work quite a bit, like Fred Chappell, Nancy Tilley, and I can go on and on. Lee Smith. So, of course, I am grateful to White Oak High School, Shaw University, NC State University, NC State University, the University of Mount Olive, where I taught a long time. Enloe High School, Cardinal Academy, taught at all those places. Marshall Chapel, New Bethel, those are my churches. And of course, I thank the NCLHOF committee, Ed. And I mentioned the North Carolina landscape. That is so crucial to my work, and its animals. And of course, the Carolina music, jazz, blues, gospel. It's all in my work. It's all in me. In conclusion, I accept this great honor this introduction into the North Carolina Literary Hall of Fame with gratitude and love. I thank you, Crystal. Wow, North Carolina Writers Network, and all of today's attendees, all of you, may God bless you.
Well, we've bookended this ceremony with poets. And now Jill McCorkle will be introducing for induction Ron Rash and reading a selection from his works.
Double the honors for me today. This is such a great event, and what a star lineup. Thanks, Ed, and everybody who makes this happen. I'm honored to be a part of it. What a literary treasure Ron Rash is. And he also stands in that very small circle of writers who can do it all. The accomplished poets who are also writing stories and novels. Hardy, Plath, Poe, Atwood, and Wendell-Berry, to name a few among the few. Ron Rash is deservedly right in that lineup. And I add to that essays. I just heard him talking about one I need to look up. I think of his lovely poem, 3 a.m. and the Stars Were Out, and then the expanded version of the very moving story that shares its title. That lineup alone is worthy of a class. Ron is a master of the short story form, and I would put his work up against any out there. Along with 3 a.m., I regularly teach his story, The Ascent, because it is that perfect example of a work that makes you gasp at the end in the same moment you see all that has led you there. He takes us to those most complicated places and leaves us at the threshold, the experiences of loss, poverty, addiction, betrayal, as well as devotion and moments of great compassion. We're close enough to touch. It's no wonder that he won the Frank O'Connor International Short Story Award. One of my favorite quotes about Ron's work, and there are many, is from the Irish Times, where it was written, "Magnificent is suddenly too small a word." And his novels garner the same powerful praise: gorgeous, brutal, flawless, elegant, masterful, one of our very finest. The first time I ever heard Ron read his work, he was reading from Saints at the River, a riveting scene of a young girl being swept away in the current. The action was harrowing and suspenseful, and the language beautiful, and I realized that I wasn't the only person leaning forward and holding my breath. He had mesmerized the whole auditorium of us. And who could ever forget his villainous Serena, the Lady Macbeth, Mrs. Danvers Maleficent of modern fiction? There are images from that novel that I will never forget. They're terrifying, and yet it's all written so beautifully you can't look away for 1 second. His latest novel, The Caretaker, is as close to perfect as I can imagine a novel could be, and strikes a quieter tone, firmly rooted in the 1950s in Blowing Rock. It's a love triangle that shines a light on honesty and sacrifice and gives us Blackburn Gant, a true literary hero. Scarred by childhood polio, Blackburn tends to the local cemetery, having been taught that caretaking is a duty for the living and the dead. Perhaps that's an apt description of what Ron Rash has done and is doing in his work, as he preserves time and history, resurrecting lives and stories on the page. Ron is also a devoted, generous teacher and has been for years at Western Carolina, adding yet another dimension to his distinguished career. And though we have to share him a little bit from time to time with that other Carolina, today he belongs to North Carolina. The epigraph for his new and selected poems has a quote from Seamus Heaney. I had my existence, I was there, me in place and the place in me. Indeed, this place is definitely in Ron Rash, and we're very lucky he's in this place. And now I'm going to read an excerpt from Above the Waterfall. As I sipped my coffee, the congregation sang, "Will there be any stars in my crown?" The piano was the same one I'd grown up listening to, rickety and never quite tuned right, but the music felt all the more sincere because of it. The same with the congregation's mismatched singing. I recognized a couple of voices, older, a bit shakier, still fervent. At the hymn's conclusion, rustles and murmurs as the hymnals got stashed in the pew pockets. Preacher Waldrop began the opening prayer. He was over 80, but his voice remained strong and vigorous. After the prayer, Preacher Waldrop read aloud from the book of Mark, the passage where Peter walks on water before getting scared and sinking. Then he launched into his sermon. There Peter was, with Christ Almighty standing right before him, the fella even now called the rock of the church, and Peter floundering away with no more grace than a three-legged mule. Ponder it. The same Peter that seen the lame trot off without a stumble, blind folks with their eyes awash in every color of the rainbow. Peter had been there to witness it all. His own eyes seen the dead wiggle out of grave quilts like a moth shucking its cocoon. Have you seen such a sight in your woods or fields, brothers and sisters? I have. It was of an afternoon, and I thought that cocoon was nothing more than a fox turd. They ain't no way to say it but that. All brown and dried up looking. Then that cocoon give a shiver, and this little head poked through, and then its body spread out as pretty a set of wings as I've seen on bird or butterfly. Big green wings, the very color of new life itself. Now you're thinking, preacher, you was talking about old Peter, and now you're talking about moths. Brothers and sisters, it's all one. There Peter was, looking straight into the very eyes of God, walking the Sea of Galilee, and then of a sudden up to his neck in water. Some would argue he lacked the true believing, but I say he had enough faith to go it a ways, and when he couldn't go farther, Christ fetched him up. What am I saying? I'm saying that the walk to God ain't easy for the best of us. Now some would say, preacher, if Peter had missed out there in the very glory of the Lord, what of us left here that ain't seen the dead raised nor the leper folk healed? All we seen is hard trials and sorrows. I'd not deny it. Burdens are plenty in this world, and they can pull us down in the lamentation. But the good Lord knows we need to see at least the hem of the robe of glory, and we do. Ponder a pretty sunset or the dogwoods all a-blossom. Every time you see such, it's the hem of the robe of glory. Brothers and sisters, how do you expect to see what you don't seek? Some claim heaven has streets of gold and all such things, but I hold a different notion. When we're there, we'll say to the angels, why, a lot of heaven's glory was in the place we come from. And you know what them angels will say? They'll say, yes, pilgrim, and how often did you notice? What did you seek? Thank you. And now Ron Rash, an honor.
I do hope you continue to think about the people in Western North Carolina and not just the West. I think what we're going through, we can't even get to where we understand it yet. I feel like, getting this award, I may not be a starter, but I finally made the team. So, and I am so pleased that Jill McCorkle was the one who introduced me. A great friend, but also a great writer, And a few years ago, I was in Nashville, and a reader came up to me who'd been to some of the programs and said, if you were a woman, you'd sound like Jill McCorkle. And I guess we found out what I'd sound like today, so that was great. I do want to mention that one person that Jill and I both loved, Randall Keenan, and he didn't have to go to heaven to be an angel. And I want to also mention 3 writers that were crucial for me: Robert Morgan, Lee Smith, and Fred Chappell. They taught me so much. Everything I write, you can find the influence of it. But they also they were such good, generous people. They, in that sense, I tell people they taught me how to behave, to be a little bit better maybe than I am, or at least try to be. So that example has been so important to me. Lee actually got me the job at Western Carolina, and it was something she didn't have to do. And that's when you know how people, the good people, when people that you're not going to do anything for them. They're doing it knowing you can't repay them. So that was important. My friends who grew up with me are here, several of them, close friends, and they call me Ron Boy, after John Boy Walton. And I would like to think of that as they were trying to, get me revved up, or not mere mockery, but I hope that's not true. I do want to talk about, my family. Actually, last week, one of my aunts, who was a really important influence, really taught me a lot about literature. She went to UNC Greensboro, was buried in Blowing Rock, and as you know, the funeral had to be delayed. But also my sister Kate, my Aunt Kate and my Aunt Peggy are in Pinehurst. They're here, so in the city, so that's connection and all those. But I particularly want to mention my sister Kathy, who's here, and her husband C.H. I taught 20 years at a community college after teaching a couple of years of high school. And I was teaching 5 to 6 classes. I was at the point where I was really trying to write as much as possible, and I was teaching those classes. And they bought me out of bondage. They paid the community college to get someone to take 3 of my classes. So I had a much less of a load, and it really made a difference. And that was an act of kindness I will never forget. And my brother Tom has been a really good, my first editor. Usually, brothers don't have to be nice to you. So he's very honest and has made my work better, made me a better writer. My children will not be here today, but I think maybe my proudest achievement that they've turned out to be the good people that they are. My wife Ann is here. Fred Chappell, if you know his poem Midquest, there's a poem called Hallowwind, and near the end of it, Susan, who was Fred's wife, has 3 lines where she says, "I wish I weren't a writer's wife. I'd be happy as a leaf and curl up in a bright, warm life." And it's not easy being the spouse of a writer, and I certainly know that and the problems but she's been very loyal to me. In times where I've had some serious problems with depression, she stood by me. And I'm very grateful for that. Maybe the most amazing thing of all, and I'm very proud of myself in some way, we've been married, I think, 42 years now, and it was only 6 months ago that she turned to me and for the first time said, "I married a crazy man." And I thought, I fooled you that long? Yeah. And but I am grateful. She's been a blessing. And I just want to finish mentioning my parents. My parents, my father's family's from Buncombe County, the Lester community. My mother's family's from Aho community in Watauga County. And, both young Appalachians, and they actually met. My mother came down from Watauga County and at a cotton mill in Chester, South Carolina. My father's family had been going back and forth, and they met in the cotton mill. My father dropped out of high school. He'd gotten as far enough to where he actually got a high school ring, but then he had to stop and go into the mill, so he didn't graduate. But then he went back to school, got his high school degree, and then, after working in the mill, he'd work a shift, and then finally got an equivalent of a GED. Then would take night classes after working shifts at the mill. My mother was working as well, and she would later, when she was in her 30s, go back to get a college degree herself. And they made my life, gave me possibilities I could not, that they did not have. And I'm so grateful for what they did. And I want to thank all of you for coming. That's the ring, my father's high school ring that he didn't graduate with. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Ed Southern. I'm the Executive Director of the North Carolina Writers Network. And if you haven't, thank you. And if you haven't yet, you're about to thank me, because I'm fixing to tell you where the wine is. But before I do that, there are lots of other people who deserve thanks, and I'm going to give it to at least some of them, if not everyone. It is the privilege and honor of the North Carolina Writers Network to oversee the North Carolina Literary Hall of Fame, but we couldn't do it without the invaluable cooperation and coordination of other organizations, including the North Carolina Collection at UNC Chapel Hill Libraries and their curator, John Blythe, North Carolina Humanities and their executive director, Sherry Paula Watkins, and, of course, the Weymouth Center, their executive director, Katie Wyatt, as well as Andy Rose, and your hostess with the mostest today, Pat Revere-Seal. Please give them all a round of applause. I would like to thank our selection committee who chooses the inductees for the Literary Hall of Fame, and especially their chair, Margaret Bauer. Please give them a round of applause. And I especially want to recognize today Denise Baker, who created these beautiful works of art that each of our inductees are going to go home with today. So please give Denise a round of applause. You can read more about Denise, as well as the many who donated and sponsored today's induction ceremony, in the program booklet. If you did not get one on your way in, I hope you'll pick up one on your way out. And if you would like to become a donor to the Literary Hall of Fame yourself, we will have donation forms inside the great room, conveniently where the wine's going to be. So you're welcome to pick up a donation form. We will also have a QR code that you can scan to make an online donation. Have some wine first. A glass, 2, 3. We've got plenty. It is especially nice to see all of y'all here today after this past week. And it is especially hard to think of those who cannot be here with us today. Given that all of us are here because of our love for these writers and for their work, it makes it really hard to believe that there are some people in this great state of North Carolina who don't think that anyone cares much about reading anymore. Makes it even harder to believe that there are some people in North Carolina who would just assume that nobody cares about reading anymore. But here we are, metaphorically. literally, physically, spiritually. Here we are today with these writers, with their work. So let's enjoy that. We have a reception waiting for you in the great room of the Boyd House right behind you. Thank you all for being here today. Thank you to our speakers, our presenters, our readers, and most especially, congratulations and thank you to our inductees. Give them one last round of applause. Thank you.